Segment 5. What's a radical? On Ricochet recently, you've been sticking up for the idea, the existence, the importance of moderate Muslims. Quote, quoting you, Claire, the distinction between radical and moderate Islam must be drawn if we are to avoid radicalizing the moderates. Close quote. How do you draw the distinction?
If we were sitting here with friends of mine who are moderate Muslims, they would join this discussion enthusiastically, and they would not want to shut the conversation down. But I think the main, you can look at it.
So freedom of speech or comfort with the notion of free exchange of ideas, argument, even about the religion.
The main thing is that the vehicle for communicating difference, if you're dealing with, I don't like the term moderate because it sounds like these people are not genuinely religious, and that's not true. You can have someone who is as passionately religious as a radical, but who does not believe it.
Go ahead. I will return to that point, but go ahead.
But the main difference is that difference of agreement is settled through discussion, not through violence. Okay. Violence is the key thing that you need to look at. And when you talk about crypto radicals, you need to look at people who are in some way supporting those who are violent, either by glossing it over or by apologizing for it. But there is, in my view, a difference between Al-Qaeda and
your neighbors.
Well, of course there's a difference between Al-Qaeda and my neighbors. What am I going to be living amid neighbors who believe in Al-Qaeda? Of course not. Of course not. But I'm talking about, we've been having this discussion on Ricochet about Muslims who seem to be moderate, but then when you peel away the surface and you see who they're hanging out with and what you're thinking, well, that's not that moderate, and what does that really mean? Well, there is a difference between Muslims who are in that gray area of maybe having some friends that we're not very comfortable with, and Al-Qaeda.
Okay. A couple of quotations now. Here's one.
But we nonetheless need to call that what it is, too.
And again, this is getting to the question of what is a moderate Muslim. Rule Mark Gerecht. Actually, I got this. You quoted him, so I'm giving you back a quote. This is Rule Mark Gerecht. Quote, a moderate Muslim is someone who unqualifiedly renounces the applicability of the Sharia, the holy law, in American society. That's a very clear, simple test. I will live by the laws, by the criminal laws of the state of New York, say, and not seek secretly to submit myself instead to the Sharia. Hold on, that's quotation one, and here's quotation two. Mark Stein, writing in his book America Alone. There are moderate Muslims, but there is no moderate Islam. And Mark goes on to point out that all the major juridical branches of Islam insist on Sharia. So what do you do with that?
Here's the problem. When you start using words like Sharia and jihad, you're always going to get someone who says, but that's not the proper translation. Right?
Well,
I don't think we should not be in the business of trying to interpret the Quran and say what these words mean or should mean. It's very clear. Do you abide by the laws of the United States? Do you abide by the spirit and the letter of the laws of the United States? And do you think do you think the Constitution should be the Constitution of
precisely
that governs over you?
Right.
Let's not get into the word Sharia. Let's just say, do you accept our laws? Do you accept our Constitution?
Right.
That's your test right there.
Right. But Mark is making the point that excuse me, I don't want to put words into his mouth, so let me make the argument just to test you on it. But you were saying a moderate Islam, you don't like the word because it suggests they can't be religious. But that's precisely the point he's making. But I believe that the extent to which a Muslim is faithful, delves deeply, reads deeply in his own religion, to that extent he'll be drawn toward a rejection of American law in a favor of, I can't use the word Sharia now because I've agreed not to use it. That to the extent to which a Muslim is moderate, that Muslim does not take his religion as seriously.
No, it means that he's decided that the way that the religion ought to be interpreted is different from someone who has decided to emphasize those parts of the Quran which are, or the ways of interpreting the Quran which are uniquely. Okay. I mean, of course, you can interpret any text in many, many different ways. I'm not just saying this to be postmodern. I'm not saying this because I'm influenced by fashionable leftist trends. There is no such thing as a text you can't interpret in multiple ways, and this is especially
but
true.
in Islam there sure is, in the sense that there are specific schools, and if your imam says this is what this text means, there's no doubt that in Islam a lot of people sign up and say, yes, sir, that's what it means, right?
What's your point with
that? The point there is that there are leaders in Islam that we can look at schools of thought. It's not infinite. It's not. Islam is not constructed like the English department at a liberal arts college where everybody gets to deconstruct Robert Frost as he chooses. It's not like that.
Okay, let's separate the questions. The first is a moderate Islam philosophically possible? The second is,
yes,
is
right.
it the dominant strain?
Okay, so your answer A is definitely it is. Is that right?
Of course it's philosophically possible. And second, yes, there are moderate Muslims.
Okay, which leads me to Bernard Lewis.
Whether there are many of them, that is actually the important question that we need to be asking ourselves.
Bernard Lewis, writing earlier this week in the Wall Street Journal, quote, a form of moderation has been a central part of Islam from the very beginning, writes this great scholar of Islam. For the moment, there does not seem to be much prospect of a moderate Islam in the Muslim world. This is partly because in the prevailing atmosphere, the expression of moderate ideas can be dangerous, even life-threatening. Close quote. Not much prospect of a moderate Islam. From Bernard Lewis himself, the leading scholar of Islamic culture and belief. What do you do with that? He's right?
It depends where. There certainly is in Turkey.
There is still prospect.
Of course there is in Turkey. Would I be...
You say of course as if I'm...
Do you think I'm suicidal? I live there. Would I be there if I lived there?
Yeah, but the question we're asking really is here's the demographic argument, right?
Yeah.
You've got this modernized elite in Turkey centered in the two urban centers, Istanbul and Ankara. And you've got a huge Anatolian peninsula outside Ankara, which is the size roughly of New England and New York and Pennsylvania. It's big. And it's broadly speaking rural, and it is conservative in outlook, and it has a higher birth rate than the modernized elites of Ankara and Istanbul. And so on demographics alone, Turkey's going to drift in the wrong direction in coming years.
That's assuming that these Anatolian villagers are radicals, and they're not. I mean, that's
you reassure me.
Yeah. I mean, they could be radicalized. Everyone could be radicalized, I suppose, but that's not traditionally what they... And most people in these areas want economic... I mean, they voted for the AKP for economic reasons. The polls show that overwhelmingly. They want economic stability in Turkey. They want to be able to feel proud of their country. They want to be able to send... I mean, they want to be able to send their daughters to school wearing a headscarf if that's... Well, I mean, the polls show that probably 60% want that. And they really aren't that politically sophisticated. They really aren't. And no, they don't want to be the next Iran, not at all. And they don't want to be like the Arabs either, not at all. And
voters go to the polls on November 2nd. A proudly patriotic, America-loving American, but in Claire Berlinski, someone who observes the country from abroad. What would you most like to say to Americans to bear in mind as they cast their ballots?
Economic freedom.
Economic freedom. Back to Mrs. Thatcher.
Yeah, back to Mrs. Thatcher. Without economic freedom, there can be no economic growth. Without economic growth, there can be nothing else.
All right. Journalist, essayist, and the author, most recently, of There Is No Alternative, Why Margaret Thatcher Matters, just out in paperback. Claire Berlinski, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Peter Robinson for Uncommon Knowledge and the Hoover Institution. Thank you for joining us.